This is the worst punishments in human history.
Let's start with the bad and slowly work our way towards the stuff of nightmares. Number 10, the Rat Dungeon. If you were alive in London, England during the medieval period, you would have definitely heard about the Rat Dungeon.
That's what motherfuckers call your room because of how chopped the girls you're pulling are. Oh, sorry.
This was a cell that was located at the bottom of the London Tower, where prisoners were shackled and chained in complete darkness. The dungeon was connected to the nearby river. All the rats that lived along the riverbed would be pushed out of their shelters and forced to swim downstream. But to the unlucky prisoner, he never actually saw anything, and all he would hear were the soft scurries of the rats' feet entering the dungeon.
Honestly, dude, L punishment. I feel like I could fuck up a bunch of rats with just my mouth. I mean, I would get diseased and I would die. No hands, no feet. How many rats do you think that you could defeat? Low-key like 5? Brother, you're underestimating your bite strength, I feel like. Bond said 20. That's how I'm feeling, dude. 20? Just give me one bite, though. Mini, I could sit on Mini. I'm a fat ass. Yeah, that's true, low-key. If you were built, like, if you were, like, rotund as fuck, you could just, like, rolling press that. Make those boys 2D. You could tax them a dimension. A solid 20 to 30 rats. That's what I'm saying. Dude, one bite. You will gag from the taste. I'm fighting for my survival. I'm not going, it could use salt. What?
These soft noises were in the hundreds and all
Oh, hundreds? Hold on. Okay, maybe I'm wrong then.
around him. These angry and aggressive rats would then begin to take small bites from the prisoner, who had no way of defending himself. Now, he
Shimmy.
might be able to shake the rats off for a few hours, but eventually the prisoner would pass out from pure exhaustion. And while he slept, the rats would continue to take bites from his flesh. Eventually, when he would wake up, he would discover hundreds of bites throughout his entire body. But it didn't stop there. The prisoner was left here for days or weeks on end, depending on his crime. But towards the end of the medieval period, this form of punishment just got more and more deranged, eventually becoming a form of execution.
More rats. How does it get more deranged than that? You're being eaten alive. Like,
Number 9, the rack.
the rack. This took place in the London Tower.
The rack was a torture device that was used in many places throughout history. This form of punishment was originally designed for getting a confession, usually from criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war. The device looked like a large ladder, but instead of secure steps, they would actually rotate like a rolling pin. You see, when a prisoner was placed on the rack, he would have his feet and wrists tied to a ratchet pulley system, where 2 legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes and locking them in place, placing an increasing amount of strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows.
Low-key, this probably feels awesome for like the first 2 minutes. These were the original back crackers before any of the W strokers got in the game. What am I saying? Also, dude, wait, I just made a video today talking about this. I found out that executioners were societally shunned. Like, people did not like them, and it was also a family business. So there was definitely like a High School Musical, but Troy is an executioner.
Papa, I don't want to kill anymore. I want to sing.
Troy, shut up and split this little girl in 2. She stole a loaf of bread.
Dad, why won't anyone listen to me?
Sir, please don't kill me.
Listen to my dreams.
I dream of living.
This was all done to get information, but of course, a lot of the times the truth was not accepted as reality, and the prisoner would then begin to say whatever he believed the officials wanted to hear. Sometimes it would work and the prisoners would be let go, while other times they would be tortured even more for lying. When the whole ordeal was over, prisoners were usually released with dislocated joints, but oftentimes they were left completely paralyzed. That was the case in England in 1447 when a 25-year-old girl named Anne Askew would be tortured on the rack for hours and hours on end and left completely paralyzed after all her joints were dislocated. She was then carried on a chair and burned alive at the stake. All this
Oh my God.
because she read and memorized scriptures from the Bible, which she preached in private to a small group of women, which were the exact women she refused to name and expose during her torture.
Man, what a strong woman. You didn't snitch? Oh my God, dude, I'm tattletaling. I'm not even gonna lie. I don't know that there's anybody I would let my finger get cut off for even. Well, that's a lie, actually. I would lose a couple limbs for like my mom or my dad. I'd say I'm probably 50-50 on being bitch made or brave. I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. I've never been in the situation like that.
Period. If you followed any religion other than the Catholic Church, you better not say a word to anybody, including your own husband, which was the person that turned her in. Number 8. Keelhauling. This brutal punishment was carried out at sea on sailors who would steal or be violent towards others and would usually result in death. Keelhauling would start with a sailor having his arms tied with a rope, then looped around the entire circumference of the ship before being tied off to his feet. The sailor would then be thrown overboard while the group of men on board pulled on the rope to slowly drag him around the outside of the ship, including over the keel, which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the times, the sailor wouldn't even have to worry about it, since they were dead before they ever reached it.
You would drown immediately, and dude, the barnacles? Yo. Yeah, I mean, you get cut up like a cheese grater, like on the way down. I don't know if any of y'all have like been on any nautical adventures. Sorry, it's a fun little phrase. I don't know if any of y'all have LARPed One Piece before and actually ventured out on a boat, but the barnacles that form on the underside of boats, particularly old boats like this, your shit would just get lacerated immediately. Like organs would be spilling out of you easily.
Not only would the sailors be drowning and getting their backs and necks broken on the keel, they were also getting sliced apart like a cheese grater by all the sharp barnacles on the outside of the ship.
Exactly what I said, dude. Oh my God, I'm a genius.
Some miracle, a sailor actually happens to make it all the way around the ship without dying.
Let's go around again.
One of 3 things will happen. 1, he would be sent for round 2 and for sure be dead by then. 2, be freed and allowed back on the ship, where he would then slowly die to infections. Or 3, live the rest of his life single and being made fun of since he was now fully covered in scars from head to toe.
No way anyone survived that, dude. What was that called? Keel hauling? No way, dude. It's a combination of drowning, getting essentially stabbed by like thousands of knives. Barnacles grow to be like 3-4 inches long, dude. You're getting fucked, like completely. And you're getting your back broken, like the boat is baiting you on the bottom side. I bet like maybe one guy survived. I'm gonna look that up. Oh my God. Yo, wait, it's only, it was a 50% death and survival rate. Although probably 50% for only one time around would be my guess.
I bet that one guy who sprays dog medicine on his hands could survive that.
I mean, I feel like he could reach into the boat and like rip it open and crawl back inside.
Number 7, crushed by elephants.
Can it be the baddie elephant from Sing 2?
Now we are getting to the part of the list where living is no longer an option. This form of punishment has been used by many countries throughout history, but was most recently used by India in the 19th century, which is really not that long ago if you really think about it. Like, your great-grandma could have witnessed one of these. But the most disturbing case in history was when the 4th Mughal Emperor of India ordered an enormous amount of criminals to be crushed to death in a single day, simply because he was bored and needed some entertainment. The guy who forgot to pay his taxes, crushed. The man who stole an apple from the local market, crushed. The little orphan who jaywalked across the street, crushed. The man who murdered his neighbor.
Bro is Aaron. This is crazy. Yeah, I'm bored. Do the rumbling for lunch, please. I just, I don't have a YouTube video to watch, seeing that it's the 16th century and all, so.
And added his remains to a large pot of tomato soup, then fed that soup to his family and watched them eat it from the shadows with a creepy smirk on his face. He's alright. Apparently he makes a damn good soup. There are a few ways that this public execution goes down, but one thing always stays the same. There's always a guy on top of the elephant controlling its every move. And this was very intentional, as this was meant to showcase just how amazing the ruling class were. I mean, look at them. They can control an elephant. Now be impressed. The first method of execution was the one that you better pray for if this was going to be your fate. Here, the criminals would have their arms tied behind their back and their heads placed on a pedestal, where it was then crushed like a grape by the elephant's foot. Now, the second method is much more cruel. The criminal would be placed flat on the floor with their arms tied behind their backs. Then the elephants would be guided to walk over the person's body, and hopefully the criminal would die on the first go. But sometimes they just end up crushing a leg or an arm, so the elephant then has to make a U-turn and try again and again and again.
So I'm curious if there's a delineation between the two ways that they execute. Like, one is clearly worse than the other. Or is it just like vibes? Yeah, we don't have a slab to put your head on, so we're just gonna kind of like vibe this out a little bit. Getting 3-point turn crushed by an elephant is wild.
Is when a highly trained elephant was guided to slowly crush the person limb by limb. They would first crush the arms, then the legs, and then poke holes in them with the tusk until eventually dealing the final blow to the head or torso. This is the more theatrical route that rulers like the 4th Mogul love to take, and made for a truly traumatizing experience for everyone. Except for the 4th Mogul.
Yo, why have we always been ruled by psychopaths? I swear to God. Why? Like, why didn't we cut this guy in half and stab him with the elephant immediately, man? Why?
Number 6. Impalement. Probably one of the grossest and most cruel forms of punishment on the list.
Yo,
This has been
Vlad the Impaler mentioned over under. Okay, thinking about this like a parlay.
used by a few countries throughout history, but was most recently used in Egypt in the 17th century, usually against criminals that were highway
looking good.
robbers, grave thieves, or anyone who would try and start a rebellion. This punishment would start by having a criminal lay flat on their stomachs with their arms tied behind their back. They would then be sliced open with a razor to increase the size of their back door. And as soon as that incision was made, the cut would be lathered with paste to instantly stop the blood. They would then thrust in a long wooden stake.
What a like creepy punishment. Why are you like, oh, I hate this guy. Let me dig it around in his butt. Like what? Just stab him regularly. Just stab him regularly, please.
They would then thrust in a long wooden stake that was the width of a man's arm, which was sharply tapered on one end. They then begin to hit the wooden stake with the mallet, pushing it further and further in. And of course,
my
the stake was
God.
greased up beforehand to make this process a lot smoother. And once the stake has popped out of the criminal's shoulder, head, or mouth, they were pretty much long gone. He is then planted next to a busy road, like a Halloween decoration, to remind everyone that this is what
Holy
happens when you
shit.
break the law. They will be left there for the entire day and removed the following morning before the body begins to stink. But wait, there's another version of this as well. You see, on some occasions, the criminals would only be impaled just deep enough to keep them in place, but not too deep that it would cause immediate death. They would do this by having stakes that had a seated position on them to prevent the person from sliding down any further. They would then be placed on a busy road where they would suffer for hours and hours, pleading to people walking by for help, until eventually succumbing to their wounds.
Holy
Number
shit.
5.
How deep could you survive? I'm Googling that. I'm thinking until it stabs your intestines. Yeah, well, it probably depends low-key on what's in your intestines, if I had to guess. Poena cullei.
Poena cullei is Latin for penalty of the sack. And that's exactly what it was, just
Balls
a lot more
punchers.
terrifying and cruel. This was an exclusive punishment for anyone that would murder their own family members. This was first seen in the 2nd century in Rome, but would later be used by the Germans in the 18th century. This all begins with a convicted murderer being placed inside a thick leather bag. But just to make sure the man isn't lonely, they would then add a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. I don't know what these animals did to deserve this, but hey, at least the evil family murderer doesn't die alone. Once all the animals are added inside the bag, it is then sewn shut, creating an almost airtight seal. Now you would think this would be horrible enough, but no, this is just the beginning. Because as soon as the bag is sewn shut, it is then tossed into the ocean. But don't worry, later on, these murderers would be given the option to either be placed inside the leather bag or be sent to perform at the Colosseum, where they can perform the act of being mauled to death in front of all of their loved ones and peers.
Which one are you taking? If you had to say, do you reckon Diddy is the reincarnation of King Vlad because they liked penetration? Different kinds of penetration. I don't know exactly if Vlad the Impaler opted for a more freaky round 2, but I'm gonna have to veto the idea. Coliseum 100%. I want to go out with a show. That is true. You could possibly you could farm aura. Like if you take out an eye of one of the bears, which I could do. I think before I get mauled to death by a bear, or while it's mauling me to death, I could take out an eye, and that would be he's kind of cool. Yeah, he stole a loaf of bread and he's scum of the earth, but he's got that swag to him a little bit.
4. Rats.
Oh, rat bucket. Hold on. That should have been my parlay. God damn.
Sick punishments in all of human history, and it involves the use of rats. I will cover two of them here as they are very similar.
Rat bucket.
The first use of this form of punishment dates back to 1568 during the 80 Years' War. Diedrich Sonoy would often use this method of punishment, which involved placing a rat inside of a clay bowl, then placing it topside down on a prisoner's stomach, chest, face, or groin. Then the back of the bowl would be heated with either a torch or some coals, causing the rat to go.
I didn't know they were putting that shit on dead. Dude, what? Imagine getting you go out getting topped off by Remy. Dude, what? I misunderstand what's going on. Yo, Remy, you are all teeth right now, man. Open up.
Full on panic, trying to escape from the heat. And its only way out was to burrow into the human. Once inside, it would continue to chew and tear apart whatever was in its way, desperately searching for a way out. Eventually, the rat finds its way out of the maze and survives. The same could not be said for the prisoner. But the second method was much, much worse, and was highly secretive since it was used under the guidance of the dictator Augusto Pinochet, where he held power from 1976 through 1983. They called it the rectoscope, and I'm sure you have already figured out where this is going. Yes, it's exactly.
Why is the name kind of tight though? The rectoscope sounds like some shit that would have been in like a COD clip from like 2014 that would get you put in phase. Yo, bro, have you seen the rectoscope clip?
They would place a tube on a prisoner's back door, then insert a rat inside of the tube. The rat would then begin to burrow its way in. These people were so sick that they actually expected the prisoners to answer questions while this was going on. Eventually, the rat would find its way in and begin to move forward to find its way out. Nobody really knows how many people died from this punishment, but we do know that a ton of people went missing when this dictator was in charge. Number 3, gibbeting.
Dude, rats must have suffocated inside of you, no? Sorry, that's like mad brutal to say. That's not even funny, but like, I feel like if you were a creature that small digging through an airtight space with like mad fluids flowing, you would probably like, no, you'd probably die inside of the stomach. Like, there's no way you're making it all the way out.
Number 3, gibbeting. The last known use was in the early 1900s in Afghanistan.
Ah, wait, this is the shit that be hanging around in like Dark Souls games. This is one of the FromSoft favorites. Tight.
This all came to light in 1921 when the National Geographic published this image in their magazine. This was also used in the United States from time to time during the 17th and 18th century. One notable example was in Boston, Massachusetts, where a few pirates were hung at the Boston Harbor, which served as a warning to any sailors that were approaching Boston. Now let's talk about England, since they love this form of
Wait, they hung them in
punishment so much. In England, this was used on traitors, murderers, pirates, and thieves. But after the year 1752, the Murder Act was passed, which required that all convicted murderers must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort. And over 134 confirmed people met this fate. The most common form of gibbeting were actually cages, and they looked like this. It was an all-steel cage that was shaped tightly to the form of a human body, which was so tight that it would not allow the person inside to move.
That's crazy. Damn.
They were then hung.
I thought they were like way bigger. Like I thought you were able to like chill in there for a little bit. Very naive of me. Maybe I got brain rotted by FromSoft games, because sometimes I'd see the corpses in there and I'm like, yo, Loki, that looks like a cool lookout point.
30 feet or more.
I mean, look at this.
More off the floor, usually on a public road or water hole, to ensure that the most amount of people could witness this monstrosity. But I could only assume this was more annoying than anything, since every time you get thirsty and needed to fill up your container of water, you would have to deal with the dying man begging you for a sip. After the criminals would die in the cages, the body would be left inside to rot for years and years on end, with the locals
Dude, no shit we had plagues, brother. What? I wonder why every time I try to feed my daughter this liquid, she immediately like poops out all of her organs. You got a dead body hanging over the main water source for the entire town. Relic, I dub you the Haikage of the village hidden in the Kush. Come on, what an honor.
Complaining that the smell of death was so pungent that they couldn't even sleep at night. There's even been reports that some human remains stayed inside of these cages for over 20 years before a government official would finally remember to clean it out. Number 2, Scaphism. This was a form of punishment that was used by the ancient.
One of y'all taught me about this. This shit is the worst one of all.
First, the criminal would be placed inside of a boat on their backs and tied down. The boat had 4 holes cut out so that the person's arms and legs would be outside of the boat and in the water. They were then force-fed large quantities of honey and milk until their stomachs were visibly full. They would then proceed to lather their entire body with the milk and honey as well. After all these steps were completed, he was then pushed out to the middle of the lake where he was completely exposed to the heat of the sun. But the sun would soon become the least of his worries. You see, the reason they fed him milk and honey was not because it was a great last meal, but because this combination causes the person to get extreme diarrhea, which mixed with the sweet honey attracts rodents, bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals live near the lake. After being tormented by the animals throughout the entire night, you would think that the daytime maybe gets a little better. No, because as soon as the sun rises the following day, the person inside of the boat gets another gigantic meal of milk and honey and
Yo, they re-up? He needs to get hit with a chug jug? That's crazy.
It was also well documented that the rodents would continuously attempt to burrow inside of the person through their back door. They were probably trying to get a head start on their next meal. A writer named John Sonaris wrote in great detail about one of these incidents. He would go on to say that it was one of the most horrid and cruel forms of punishment since it was terribly long and seemed to have no end in sight. He wrote about a man who survived for an entire 17 days before he
17 days? Well, yeah, because you're being fed. Oh, so you wouldn't just starve to death or like die of dehydration. That's fucked. Oh my god.
Finally died from his wounds. Apparently, the man spent his last few days with his entire face completely covered with wasps, and his flesh rotting away filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own filth.
Easily the most psychopathic thing, a psychopathic punishment that I've ever seen. Dear God. These are getting worse too. There's one that's worse than this, supposedly. The oubliette.
Yeah, it simply means to forget in French. This was a punishment that was used in many places throughout history, including in the London Tower, which had a small and confined room called Little Ease. Not only was this room pitch black, it was also so small that prisoners could not sit, stand, or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in this uncomfortable position.
Now motherfuckers are like, yeah, actually, we can't have homeless people be comfortable ever. Let's design our city based around these principles.
Stand or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in this uncomfortable position
Gavin Newsom wants to make bus benches into fucking this thing.
for days on end. One of the most famous oubliettes is not the one in the London Tower, but in the neighboring district of Warwick, inside of Warwick Castle. Here, deep underground in the castle's dungeons, is a very small and narrow cell, completely made of stone, which has a metal door to close it shut. Prisoners were tossed inside of the cell and forgotten about, as the name implies. The prisoner would just have to sit there and wait for their inevitable death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation. Now, of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most of the time there would already be a rotting corpse inside of the cell to keep the new prisoner company. The previous occupier of the cell would serve as a daily reminder of his upcoming fate. But that's not the only companions that he will have, since the underground dungeons are completely infested with rats that have developed a taste for human flesh. But wait, there's more. These oubliettes existed in many of the castles throughout Europe, and in recent times they have actually discovered these dungeons with dozens, if not hundreds, of human remains inside of it, as proof that they were hardly ever cleaned.
Oh my god, so they would just throw your ass into the human stew. Ah, this woman is a wench. She cheated on her husband. How do I know this? Intuition. God told me. Throw this woman in the human stew, please. Like having the eternal flesh stew that's like the equivalent of like the Olympians' like eternal flame is crazy. That's so gross. Yes, we have the eternal flesh stew of the meat of the peasantry. It's always going. New editions every day.
Where in 1900, during the castle's renovation, a worker found a small opening behind a wall inside of the chapel. This hole had an 8-foot drop that led to a large oubliette. And what the worker found inside shocked him, since it was filled with so many skeletons that they needed multiple cartloads to clear it all out. But just when you think this section is over, it just keeps on giving. You see, there's been many stories of men who have been placed inside one of these dungeons and
Oh, do they start eating other people? Hold on, pre-fire. Do they eat the people?
kept alive for years and years on end,
Oh, never mind. No cannibalism.
surviving off crumbs of food and minimal amounts of water, prolonging their inevitable demise for as long as
I feel like you would just have to refuse the food at that point. I mean, if I was placed in when's the honey pack stream? Shit, whenever I got put in that previous torture device.
humanly possible. These cells were sometimes even placed on ground level so they can hear the voices and laughter of the people outside. An experience that they will never get again in this lifetime.
Damn, that's fucking crazy. Holy shit.